Imagine your neighbor could sell you for a new iPhone. Sounds insane, right? But what if the price wasn't a gadget, but an assault rifle that guarantees your family's survival in a world where everyone has suddenly started hunting each other? The situation isn't so black and white anymore. The simplistic picture of Africans happily selling their brothers for glass beads and cheap gin is a convenient myth. The reality was far more complex and terrifying. The real question isn't if they sold, but what kind of diabolical system left them no other choice? So what was the one tiny detail that turned entire regions into a free-for-all hunting ground? It was the humble matchlock musket. Before its arrival in the 16th century, African wars were fought with spears and bows. The playing field was relatively level, and the goal was control of land or trade routes, not capturing people en masse. But when Portuguese ships unloaded the first batch of firearms, the rules of the game changed forever. It was like one football team showing up to a match with machine guns. What's the other team supposed to do? A ruler of a small coastal kingdom saw his neighbor, who had struck a deal with the Europeans, gain not just guns, but absolute power. Yesterday's rival could now dictate any terms, and refusal meant total annihilation. This sparked a classic arms race. To get muskets for defense, you had to offer something in return, and the European captains didn't want gold or ivory. They wanted one commodity: people. Just like that, the musket transformed from a simple weapon into a key for survival, with the price being your neighbor's life. Let's break down how this infernal machine worked, like we're explaining it to a friend at a bar. Picture a global startup project called the Triangular Trade. European ships loaded with guns, gunpowder, textiles, and booze sailed to the coast of Africa. There, these goods were traded for slaves captured by local rulers. Then, the holds, packed with human cargo, crossed the Atlantic. In the Americas and the Caribbean, the slaves were sold to plantations, and in return, the ships were loaded with sugar, tobacco, and cotton, which were sold in Europe for a massive profit. The most cynical part of this scheme is that Europeans rarely went deep into the jungle to hunt people themselves. It was dangerous and inefficient. Why bother when you can create a market? They were like Uber or Amazon. They built the platform and invited local entrepreneurs to join. They built fortified trading posts on the coast that were essentially supermarkets where you could trade people for manufactured goods. This system removed their direct responsibility and shifted it to African leaders, creating the illusion of a voluntary partnership. As a result, entire states restructured their economies to serve the slave trade. Traditional agriculture and crafts fell into decline. Why grow something when you can just raid a neighboring village and get everything you need from the Europeans? This was the dumbest and, simultaneously, the most brilliant part of the mechanism. The system fueled itself. The more guns one kingdom got, the more slaves it could capture, and the more desperately its neighbors needed guns to defend themselves, thus entering the very same bloody race. Let's take the kingdom of Dahomey as our anti-hero for this story. Starting as a small state, Dahomey was under pressure from the powerful Oyo Empire, which demanded tribute. The only way to survive and gain independence was to get European weapons, and the only currency to buy those weapons was slaves. The rulers of Dahomey, like King Agaja, turned their state into a highly efficient war machine with the primary goal of capturing people. This wasn't an act of innate cruelty, but one of cold political calculation. Their main obsessive idea was domination. They created a unique army, which included the famous Amazons elite all-female regiments. Annual raids on their neighbors became the bedrock of their economy and state ideology. Dahomey's key mistake was that by going all in on the slave trade, they became completely dependent on their European partners. When the Europeans decided to abolish the slave trade in the 19th century, Dahomey's economy collapsed, and the kingdom became easy prey for French colonizers. They had built a strong state on the most rotten foundation imaginable. So, what about the common people? Before this era, their lives were predictable. The main threats were drought, disease, or a conflict with a neighboring community. But now, the danger was total and unpredictable. The threat could come not just from an enemy tribe, but from your own government. Any petty crime, false accusation, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time could end in a one-way trip to lifelong slavery across the ocean. Trust, the foundation of any society, was utterly destroyed. People tried to adapt. Villages moved to hard-to-reach, defensible locations, on hills or deep in the forests. Some communities created secret societies and warning systems to alert each other about approaching slave raiders, but it was a life of constant fear. Imagine not being able to stray far from home because you could be captured. Life before was a life in a poor but familiar world. Life after became a daily lottery where the grand prize was simply remaining free for one more day. The great idea for an African ruler was to build a powerful, centralized empire using European technology. In their eyes, it was a path to progress and security. They believed that by playing by the new rules, they could protect their people and rise above their neighbors. For a short time, it even worked. Kingdoms like Ashanti or Dahomey did become formidable regional powers whose musket-wielding armies were terrifying. But this was a highway to a grand failure. The direct but unexpected consequence was the complete depletion of their most valuable resource, people. Lands became empty, entire nations vanished. The most absurd and ironic result was that in their quest for independence, these kingdoms created the perfect conditions for future colonialism. They destroyed internal alliances, bled their own lands dry, and proved to Europeans that the continent was ripe for exploitation. Instead of strong empires, they left behind a scorched earth populated by warring, deeply traumatized societies. So who was the main victim? It wasn't just the 11 million people shipped across the Atlantic in inhuman conditions. The main victim was the African continent itself. Its social fabric was torn to shreds. The dark side of this progress of muskets and new goods was the annihilation of trust between neighbors, nations, and even family members. The resource being wasted with horrifying speed was human potential. Generations of farmers, artisans, poets, and thinkers ended their lives on sugar plantations. It was a fire sale of the future to survive the present. So did Africans sell their neighbors for guns? Yes, but it wasn't a simple betrayal for profit. It was a diabolical trap, an arms race forced upon them from the outside. In a system where opting out meant certain destruction at the hands of an already armed neighbor, the choice was between bad and monstrous. African rulers became not so much villains as tragic figures, forced to pay an unimaginable price in an attempt to save their own people. Now, put yourself in their shoes. What would you choose? To maintain your moral purity and watch your people be annihilated, or to make a deal with the devil to give them a chance to survive, paying for it with the souls of others? Let me know what you think in the comments, as it's one of the most difficult questions in history. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep dive. By the way, in this bloody game, there were some who dared to say no. In our next video, we'll tell the story of a queen who waged a war against the Portuguese and their allies for nearly 40 years, becoming a symbol of resistance. Her story proves that even in the darkest of times, there is always a place for heroism.